interview. So let's go. First, I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zayas Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Welcome, everyone, to our very first interview that is not with Linda. Also, our second interview with Pathfinder developer and real-life rules lawyer, Ron Lundeen. Before we get started with the fake YouTube intro and all of the interview stuff, I just want to remind people about some Twitch-related information. So, as usual, we have up a... Oh, wait, actually, hold on a second. As not usual, because I've been uninstalling and reinstalling Streamlabs every stream to try to make sure that you guys never have the XP bug again. But I think I've not activated it as an overlay. So now it's activated as an overlay, and you should be seeing a poll.
The poll just went up.
Yeah, this poll's for Tuesday's episode. Saturday's episode has been locked in based on your previous poll. So we'll figure out what the poll is there.
And you may notice that GM Tools has a question mark on it. That's because we did not have time to come up with another GM Tools idea. That doesn't mean that we are completely out of GM Tools ideas. There's plenty of other stuff. We just didn't come up with one yet for this week. So if you have any GM Tools ideas, please put them in the chat and we can get them added to the poll.
And if you want to do GM Tools, no matter what, you can just vote for it. If you want, if you need an explanation of any of the other choices, just let us know. All right. So with that out of the way, Ron, thank you for being patient. We're going to do our fake YouTube introduction. So, on a count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zayas Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. We have a great show for you guys tonight, and we brought in Ron Lundeen, Pathfinder developer and real-life rules lawyer. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, we might have some questions from people from the chat, but before we get started... Oh, wait, no, look, we already have some. Wow, this is such a real introduction. Yes, it's completely real. It's the best. All right. So, Ron, can you tell us a little bit about why you sometimes call yourself a real-life rules lawyer? I think that's a funny way to start it off.
Sure. I've been a gamer for forever, since I was about 9 years old. But my actual education path led me through math, and then into some graduate work in ancient history. And then I realized I was sort of directionless, enjoying school, but didn't know necessarily what I wanted to do with my life. Realized that people who had been telling me for many years that I'd make a good lawyer weren't actually insulting me. They were giving me some genuine career advice. And then another guy that I was in the history graduate program with had his sights set on law school. We talked a lot about it, and it sounded like something that I could certainly do. So more in the vein of, well, let's see if I can do this. I did some studying for the LSAT. And then the day I went in to take it, it was like the best test day of my life. I mean, my actual score was way better than any of the practice scores I'd gotten, and enough to get me into a really, really good law school. I got into the University of Chicago, which is sort of top 5 law schools in the nation, and it was a really exciting moment for me. It was both because everything was sort of real. Like, well, I guess maybe I am good at this. Maybe I can do this. And so I went to law school and then became a lawyer. Worked for 6 or 7 years in a law firm in downtown Chicago, primarily working with health law. A lot of transactional work. I didn't ever show up in a courtroom or anything like that. In fact, it wasn't until years later when I needed to accompany a family member into a courtroom for a very procedural thing. For many years, I was able to say, I'm a lawyer, but I've never actually set foot inside a courtroom since the day I was sworn in.
Wait, have you never done jury duty?
What's that?
Have you never done jury duty?
No. Once you're an attorney, you don't go to jury duty.
Oh, okay.
Here's
you know too much.
Here's a little secret. Yeah, if you're an attorney and you get called for jury duty, you tell the people who are making the selection, oh, professionally, I'm a lawyer, and nobody wants anything to do with you. The last thing anybody on a trial wants is somebody who knows the law and will second guess absolutely everything they do on the jury. I'm actually kind of excited now I can maybe be on a jury. They probably still won't want me because I'm still technically an attorney. Anyway, So I practiced for years in-house, and then I went to Walgreens, and I worked at Walgreens for 6-7 years. All the while, I'd been doing a lot of gaming, a lot of writing for gaming. I'd really kind of ramped up the writing that I did for Paizo and for others. And then when Paizo had an opening for a developer position, I decided that I wanted to make that jump. Absolutely could not have done it without the love and support of my wife, Stephanie, and the love, if not unconditional support of the move from my kids. I did it. We made it, I came out from Chicago to Washington about 1.5 years ago, where I joined the Paizo team, and I've not regretted it a day since.
All right.
That said, I am my status with the bar. I'm still a lawyer. My status with the bar in Illinois is inactive, and I'm actually pretty close to getting everything, all the T's crossed and I's dotted to get everything reinstated in the state of Washington to be a lawyer here. But a long transactional background. I'm an actual lawyer.
So you were a rules lawyer first, and then you became an actual lawyer.
True.
Yeah.
And now you're a professional rules lawyer.
So GM Reckless asked when Saren Ray entered your heart to turn it from evil. So I think we should tell GM Reckless and also all the lawyers out there. Now, Ron, you told me that there's something that all the lawyers who play Pathfinder should be grateful to you about that's in the upcoming core rulebook for Pathfinder 2nd edition. Can you tell us what that is?
Well, that is so every one of the backgrounds gets a bonus feat under the new 2nd edition rules. And when I was taking a look through the backgrounds, not for an entirely background related thing, I was not prowling just to see if anybody had any bad thing to say about lawyers. The lawyer background is the one, barrister, I think it is technically. Yeah. Gave the ability to deceive and the a feat that was related to lying. Like,
yeah, I think it had lie to me, maybe the one where if you're good at lying, you can cross-examine someone really well.
Yeah, it was crossed over. There was it was all about the skill was about deceiving, but the bonus feat wasn't. Anyway, there seemed to be a matchup that needed to be fixed there, and I lobbied hard to get that leaning towards the diplomacy side, not the deception side. A lot of lawyers they spend a lot of time convincing people, persuading people. Few lawyers genuinely spend a lot of time actually actively lying to people. So tried to raise lawyers' good name.
And just like here on the stream, okay, there's a lot of echo. Ron, do you have any headphones that you could put on? I think it's coming from your side, maybe. Although now it's not there.
Yeah.
All right.
Let me give this a try here.
All right, yeah, let's give it a shot.
You are our first guest who isn't literally right here with us, so there's going to be a few
So this is the first time that we have the desktop's audio turned on for the video. And it's been working pretty great, especially given the fact you don't have headphones on. We didn't hear any echo at all before the stream started. All right, so...
All right.
No, that sounds good.
No echoes.
All right.
All right, so yeah, just like Ron did here for all of you guys, in the office, Ron succeeded in his deception check to tell us that lawyers do not usually use deception check.
Oh, come on.
And therefore, we changed it to diplomacy.
No, so. Ron is like such a nice and genuine guy.
So it's either moving lawyers in the direction of diplomacy because we're about persuasion, or it's that all lawyers, myself included, are so good at lying that I'm convincing people that we're no good at lying.
Or both.
little from column A, little from column A. That's it.
All right, great. So I remember, Ron, you've told a story about your very first assignment for a Pathfinder Society scenario. Do you want to talk to the fans here on Arcane Mark a little bit about sort of how you got your first assignment? Was it tied to...
Sure. Yeah, back in the year 2 or so of the Pathfinder Society, year 2, early year 3, in order to get more authors, the Pathfinder Society had an open call where you'd sort of pitch an idea and they'd take the idea and see whether it was worth sussing out, hiring somebody to develop a full adventure. And the idea that I put together was not a standalone adventure, but because I'd played up till then all of the Pathfinder Society scenarios, was very, run a lot of them, I was really sort of into it. I picked one that I liked, that I thought kind of left a little bit of a story hanging, had a little bit of a possibility there, and I pitched a sequel to it. The Tide of Twilight was the name of the scenario, which is basically scrambling and trying to do something before the sun goes down. And I pitched a sequel to that, spiritual successor, really, that would be Tide of Morning. Did I have those backwards? It was backwards. It was backwards.
It was backwards, yeah.
So Tide of Twilight was the one that I did. So Tide of Morning is you have to do something before the sun comes up, and in Tide of Twilight you have to do it before the sun goes down. Very similar type of thing, all different story, but sort of a spiritual successor to that. And anyway, so that enchanted Mark Moreland enough, I guess, or my persuasion and/or deception was high enough or both. He asked me to do it. I wrote it up, and this was the point at which I knew, and a lot of freelancers hit this point sometime early on in their careers, where I got a real sense that this was sort of the make it or break it moment, right? I had to give this my all and really impress my developer, in this case Mark, in order to make sure that it took off. And it must have. It worked. I got called back for more work in the Pathfinder Society scenario line, the campaign setting line, the player companion stuff, all the way up to the stuff that I really love, which is the adventure writing for the Adventure Path line.
Very cool. And Tide of Twilight is the only adventure that my fighter monk that I built to try to play test Crane Wing to see if it was broken or not, and it was. The only adventure where he ever went unconscious while playing at level 1 in 4 to 5 adventures, because you gave me like 4 druids who had no saving throw on their area of effect, no attack roll, no saving throw on their area of effect.
The ones that they drop rocks on you. That's all they do.
Yeah.
They just all went first and dropped 12d6 damage on me, and there was no way to stop it. So he went KO. So that is the only time he went unconscious since hitting level 2 and actually being a fighter monk.
Alrighty, so that'll teach you.
That's a trivia moment about Tide of Twilight.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome, maybe. Right.
No, it's good. It shows that even a combination that can beat pretty much anything nothing can stop. No saving throw, no attack roll, AOE.
Yeah, that's there's a little bit of that. One of the things that I remember putting into an adventure that I wrote back in the organized play days for Living Greyhawk. The way that you stacked some particularly crazy templates on gave a creature that gave sort of a brute melee creature an SR of 40 something. I want to say like 42 or 44.
And what level was this thing?
Oh, they're like 13th, 12th, 13th. And so the thing that got me is that people were complaining, hey, there's this monster, and because of your stupid high numbers, I couldn't ever affect it with spells. To which I said, well, first of all, following the template rules, so it's not my rules. I'm following the law, your officer.
Life rules, lawyer.
But more importantly, I said, have you never fought a golem before? Those things have essentially infinite SR, and nobody bats an eye at them. But as soon as you put a number on something that seems unreasonably high, suddenly people are up in arms.
Oh yeah, if you tell people they can't do it, that's very different than saying that you can do it, but you failed at it because you weren't good enough of a wizard.
Absolutely right. So what I wanted to do is not, Mark, give the druids a lot of damage with some ludicrously high save. I did you a favor by just saying no save at all.
If I had actually been level 4 to 5, I would have been up after taking that damage. I absolutely would. I was playing it at level 2, and that is what happens when you play at level 2. It was lots of fun.
So Ryan, you said that adventure paths are really your favorite thing to work on. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the adventure paths you've written?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the first one that I wrote for was I wrote the Choking Tower for the Iron Gods Adventure Path. Excuse me. And the way this the way this happened is I mentioned that for the Pathfinder Cyto scenario, I've been working with Mark Moreland as my developer, and as he moved into different product lines, I had different. He sort of brought me along with him, right? He moved on into Player Companions, so I did some writing for that. He dabbled in the campaign setting, so I did some writing for that. And he wasn't doing the Adventure Path line, so I knew that for me to sort of elevate to that, I'd have to get his recommendation to James Jacobs, who was doing that. And 1 year before Gen Con, one of the first Gen Cons that I had not planned on attending, one of the first ones in about a decade I'd planned on not attending, had some stuff going on with my family in town and things like that. Mark Moreland emailed me and said, hey, if you're coming down to Gen Con, I'd like to introduce you to James Jacobs so he can have a talk with you. So my response was, yes, Mark, I am absolutely coming down to Gen Con. How about Sunday? Because I knew I could escape sort of the family obligations first thing Sunday morning, drive down from Chicago to Indianapolis, meet James Jacobs, and then drive back by the end of the day. I did just that. Without having realized that the plan had been to meet James in the Paizo booth in the exhibit hall, but because I hadn't actually signed up for Gen Con, I had no badge to get into the exhibit hall. Fortunately, because I'd picked Sunday, that's when the people at the Gen Con exhibit hall, guarding the doors, care an awful lot less than they do earlier in the show. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to, a little bit of diplomacy, a little bit of deception, make my way in, and had that conversation with.
Is that entirely legal?
Well, no.
Didn't purchase anything.
I mean, did I cheat Gen Con out of some much needed badge money? Well, maybe.
I think they'll be okay.
I think they seem to have weathered it just fine.
I think you've made them a lot more money with the things you've since written and then had sold there.
That's probably true. And now that Gen Con is in a situation where they're capping their attendance, one more person literally could not be added. So
that's true.
But anyway, so I started. I did my work on the Choking Tower, which was an awful lot of fun, and then proceeded to relentlessly pester everybody that was working on the Adventure Path line for more opportunities to write. I actually managed to land several in a row, which I thought was quite fun. Almost certainly would have burned me out after not too much longer. So when they said, "Hey, we're gonna give you a little break, Ron, let other people have a chance to write," I'm like, but Greg Vaughn. Anyway, so I got that break, but I've still been in and writing for him. The last one that I wrote was the kickoff for the Tyrant's Grasp Adventure Path, which is the Dead Roads, the one where you start out dead. Which is an awful lot of fun. Not a spoiler. It's a feature. People have said, "Oh, it's a spoiler." No, it's a feature of the Adventure Path that you start out dead.
Yeah, I mean, part of descriptions, even for like Pathfinder Society scenarios and like coming up with the short descriptions, if it's something that you find out like in the first 10-15 minutes of playing the game, it doesn't count as a spoiler.
No, that's true. I always say that too, and then other people say, "Well, you still spoiled it." So
yeah, I guess there are a lot of people want to go into these things just totally ignorant, and I don't know. Maybe that's one way to play and be totally surprised by absolutely everything. But
yeah, I don't know. People sometimes have different opinions of what's a spoiler and what's not. For instance, I linked to this interview in the Eye of Dread thread to tell people that the author of Eye of Dread was going to be on here, and in there I saw some comments from people who saw Mark Moreland's introduction that said, like, this is gonna be all about what happened after Tyrant's Grasp, read the whole thing, and then were very upset that there were spoilers for Tyrant's Grasp in it.
That's actually, it's going to be inevitable with the decision that we made, the good decision that we made in second edition to update the world based on the events of the previous Adventure Path. If we tell people we're making updates based on how Curse of the Crimson Throne or Legacy of Fire shook out, so these things that are 10 years old, they're not going to care. But no matter what the last first edition Adventure Path was, no matter what it was, unless it had no real impact on the world at all, which would make it kind of a sad adventure path, there was going to be some one of the adventure paths was going to get sort of thrown under the bus by being the last one. That one was mine, and I'm kind of fine with it. Actually, I actually think it was a really good one. Part of the reason I think it's a really good one is that the thing I want to emphasize the most, put it in the player's guide, put it in the sort of the game master summary in the first adventure, is that Tyrant's Grasp, it's really more of a survival horror adventure path. This is not an adventure path where you should plan to go in and kill all the bad guys and win the day with unqualified successes all the time. Mm-hmm. This is an adventure path about how bad things happen, and heroes are people who can help those who are left behind, or try to mitigate it in some way, or keep the things that are awful from being less awful, rather than having them not occur at all. So that's almost the best possible adventure path, to be the one where people are learning on the back end, oh, it kind of sounds like you fail. The thing that's been fun about it is a lot of people have guessed, and at least one of them very correctly, how it is you're actually succeeding and in what seems like failure. So,
and we'll hold off from giving any exact specifics here for any listeners who might be playing in Tyrant
Such
Stress.
as No Heart the Shark.
That's right.
Such
as No Heart the Shark. However, I think that's a really interesting point that you made, Ron. And some people have said that Pathfinder can't really handle survival horror due to a combination, Pathfinder or even its predecessors, due to a combination of the way the mechanics work and the mindset of its players. Sort of hearkening back to that monster with the 43 SR, where they were like, well, that's not fair. It was 43 SR. I should be able to kill it with my spells. Do you feel that, without spoiling Tyrant's Grasp, which is maybe a tall order, do you feel that you took some efforts as the developer of Tyrant's Grasp to work with and through those assumptions and those psychological mindsets of the players to make it satisfying for the Pathfinder players to be in this survival horror game where things like that might happen?
Yes, and here's how I did it specifically. I knew that there was going to be sort of a line between being able to swing your sword around and and kill a bunch of bad guys, and something like where you're playing Left 4 Dead, right? The game, something where you you can't win and you need to run from massive hordes all the time. I erred a little bit on the side of being able to swing your sword around. That's really what people are playing Pathfinder for. So, although what I've tried to do is avoid situations where the GM has to basically put down the book and say across the table to the players, this is the part where you guys are supposed to run. What I've tried to do is make it so there are situations that are overwhelming or bad, or things that the players are coming into with the ability to jump in and help, or to try to jump in and mitigate. So it ends up being a little bit more inspiring, I think, than a gritty survival horror story would be. But I think it makes it all the better game for that.
So it's sort of like the situation is code red, and the PCs come in, they do everything that they're set out to do that is in front of them, and now it's code orange. But they don't have, is that right? And then they don't have the hordes of undead that the one guy is like, well, my build could kill 200,000 undead in one day if you just let me fight them. It's like, well, they're gone now. They've already killed some of these people, and you've done your best to help with the ones that are there. Is it sort of more like that? And less like, well, there's 200,000 undead. You have to run now.
Yeah, let me take that example, because it's a good one, and it's a very appropriate one for this campaign, and it's not at all spoilery if I hinge on your example here to be able to say it's not you're in the village and thousands of undead are coming, you're going to lose, it's just a matter of time. It's you've come to this village just after thousands of undead have attacked and the most powerful generals are still left. Well, you can jump in, you can defeat these generals that are left on a more fair footing, feel like you've had a victory, but even after you've done that, you look around and you say, well, gosh, this village took a pretty bad beating from the undead that were there. Mm-hmm. That's a sort of place in which bad things are going to happen regardless, but you could be heroic within them. And that's the needle I've tried to thread a lot through the development of the adventure path. I do have to say, before we get too far into sort of my role of the development of the adventure path, the reason that it's been as flavorful as it is, and frankly as easy as it has been for me to do this, is a lot of the groundwork and the outline for the adventure path that was set by Crystal Fraser. She left Paizo after the development of the first adventure in Tyrant's Grasp, which is after the one that I wrote. But it's unfair to think that I developed 5-6 of this adventure path. So much of that groundwork was already done in the outline and the themes and what the players were going to do and how it was going to go long before I ever took over the reins. It was neat to not only sort of help her build that, but to see what she was able to take with that and then put something in my hands that was just awesome to just tail out, basically. It was great.
So it really had two creative minds behind a lot of the stuff instead of just one. Like
two and then
two plus 6 authors plus all the other people who come into those meetings as well. But I mean, like behind the masterminding the ideas. It looks like the people in the chat are tending to agree with you, Ron. There are people saying they're looking forward to the fact this is not a typical campaign, and they point out how much more upset would people be if Tyrant's Grasp had 0 effect on Lost Omens World Guide and it was just not mentioned. So seems like people in the chat at least agree on that point.
So I guess in going from being an author for an AP to being an adventure path developer, were there any things that surprised you about?
For the same AP.
Yes. Well, I mean, not even. Yes, for the same AP, yes. But was there anything that surprised you about the experience of being a developer, sort of seeing the other side of the curtain, or anything that you find particularly exciting about the process?
Yeah, the thing that is surprising, there are a couple things that are surprising to me, is when I'm writing one of these adventure paths, I have the whole outline, I know how the whole thing's going to go, and I see what's going to happen in the adventure before mine and in the adventure after mine. And I write an introduction that pulls from the one before, and then I write a conclusion that sort of pushes to the one after in order to try to make sure everything's tied up. I found it to be fairly typical that my adventure path developers jettison those things and write their own. And then when I'm the adventure path developer, I frequently jettison those things and then write my own. I do want to preserve the author's voice, so if they got sort of a clever turn of phrase, the way they've described something, then I absolutely like to keep that. But the actual connective tissue is really what most of my job as an adventure path developer is about. And so it's not at all, I guess it wasn't, to find out that it's not just me who has introductions and conclusions chopped up, rearranged and often rewritten. That's just something that we do to everybody to make the whole thing seem like a more cohesive narrative.
Well, yeah, and Ron, if the only thing you tend to look at and be like, this is different, is the introduction conclusion, I would say that your turnovers must be pretty good, because I've heard that even the best authors usually have sections that just, for whatever reason, because a piece of art was ordered they didn't know about, that has to mean that an encounter gets changed, that there's a lot of shifts that go on.
Absolutely the case. There's also one of the biggest part of that I see when I'm doing the development is I'm trying to get a good sense of what the players know and when they know it. And that sometimes the authors have a different idea of what that is. So I'll need to sort of basically take, instead of A, B, and C, mix it up. So it's C, A, B, just because that's the way the players are coming into what's going on. And so rearranging the order of stuff is actually pretty typical. Even if the encounters themselves are really good, sometimes I'll have to reorient the order to make sure that it makes sense for the reader, so the players aren't left, wait, why were we expected to go to this, deserted butcher shop? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Oh, well, I put the thing ahead that talks, the thing that talks about the deserted butcher shop much earlier in the adventure. Oh, now it's a natural thing. Now they're actually sort of chomping. They want to get to let's just get to the butcher shop. So that sort of necessitates some change in connective tissue as well. But that's all part of the development job as well.
Now that I think about it, there's a surprising number of AP volumes where you go to a deserted butcher shop. There's at least 2 that I just thought of immediately.
Well, could be more. Who knows?
And I think I have only written one deserted butcher shop.
You've written one of the 2 that I thought of immediately.
That's right. What about, let's see, so there's All the World's Meats in Crimson Throne.
That's the other one.
There's a no. I guess technically it's a tannery shop at the beginning of Hell's Vengeance.
Yeah, that's a tannery shop. It's a little different.
So, alrighty, that's true.
GM Reckless says sawmills are real popular too. Yeah, they are. It's kind of funny. You wonder with some of these things, like, is this one particular author or one particular developer and their quirks of being like, let's have a sawmill here, let's have this kind of thing here.
I was really worried. I will tell you that for a while I was worried because I wrote the first Adventure Path adventure that I wrote was the Choking Tower, which it's a tower with an undead wizard in it, and I think it wasn't the very next one that I wrote. It might have been the next one, was Tower of the Drowned Dead, where I wrote that's a tower with an undead wizard in it. And I'm like, wait a minute, am I going to be pigeonholed into the tower with an undead wizard author guy?
I mean, surprisingly, yes, because your first Adventure Path as a developer was about a tower with an undead wizard who was in it.
Yeah,
he broke out.
I think it's kind of funny because just as we're talking about being potentially pigeonholed into adventures, Kate Baker, aka writing water adventures for absolutely everything, shows up.
Yeah, she showed up in the chat.
Hi, Kate.
You need to give her a water adventure.
I know we need to give her a second
Pathfinder
Society
second edition.
We're actually having this conversation. It's like, are we going to give her another water adventure, or is she going to feel too pigeonholed? And then she was saying like that she wanted to have the trifecta. So we got to do that, and then we got to find like a Card Society adventure too that's based on water.
Well, wait. Speaking of the Card Society, Ron.
Yes. See that segue?
There you go. You can give me a perfect segue. I've heard that you're also getting involved with the new season for the Adventure Card Society.
I am. That is a ton of fun. I'm a big fan of the adventure card game. As Linda well knows, having played in the Mummy's Mask office game that I sort of insisted on starting very shortly after I arrived, that we actually carried all the way through to ended just a couple weeks ago with our successful defeat of the Sky Pharaoh. And now both of you are involved with the new Crimson Throne, Curse of the Crimson Throne adventure in the new launch. It is. I took every opportunity to sort of nose around in the files to see the way the cards were coming. I was active on the sort of the secret playtest boards about what that was going to be like, sort of the new rules that were going to be changed. When one of our editors in the office wanted a little bit of practice with the game because he was going to be running a demo at a convention a couple months ago. I was right there. Jumped right in to be able to play as much of this as I could. But part of that fun has been not just in playing the game, but in taking big chunks of the game and rewriting it. I had a lot of fun with the first 3 adventures, making my alternate adventure paths, where it's basically, I want to tell an entirely different story with all the exact same cards that are in the box that you have. So the very first one, my relaunch of the Rise of the Rune Lords card game, the story was that this old friend of yours happened to inherit this Fort Rannoch in the mountains. In the very first adventure, you're in Fort Rannoch. He's got this weird rune well in the basement. And if you're a fan of the story of Rise of the Rune Lords and any of the stuff that goes on even in the card game, you're like, wait, that's like book 3 stuff and then book 6 stuff. And it's in the first couple of adventures in mine, sort of on purpose. Mixing it all up and telling a new story. There's an awful lot of story that these cards can tell, and the thing that's fun about writing and rewriting is being able to delve into that. I've really enjoyed digging into the Adventure Card Guild, which is that sort of fun, but within a framework that's going to be sort of telling a larger story, a larger narrative, and being able to get it out in front of a lot more people. That's been great.
Well, it was really great, too, with the first adventure. So you did the first adventure of the new upcoming season, The Year of Rotting Ruins. And one of the really great things about that is since it has this connection, it sort of comes in, there's this point drinks Tyrant's Grasp where there's just sort of and Pathfinders are over here doing something heroic while the PCs of that adventure path are doing something. But Tyrant's Grasp doesn't really get into the detail of what that something heroic is. And so it was really great to be able to not only explore that and connect with you in that way, but also to have you write that first adventure so that we could make sure that it was all tied together.
The interstitial stuff connecting the adventures together, like you were talking about before.
Yeah, exactly. That connective tissue. That's not the first time that we've made a close connection with the Pathfinder Society in the Tyrant's Grasp adventure path, or the path, the organized play. Mm-hmm. The Pathfinder Society has an adventure that actually really filled a need that we had early on when we were designing the adventure path. We said, well, there's this. According to our canon, there's this big monster in a place, and we really kind of don't need the big monster there. Hey, Pathfinder Society, can you really quick put together an adventure in which your Pathfinders go and kill this monster, so it's not a problem by the time we need to have something there?
And that's where Reaver's Roar came from. So
exactly,
we need to get rid of this giant monster. Oh, that's pretty tough. I guess a 7 to 11 it is.
Yeah, 7 to 11 Pathfinders can kill.
Yeah,
pretty much Cthulhu if they really put their mind to it. So there's an idea from the chat. GM Reckless said, if you and Kate Baker were together, you could have an inverted underwater tower with an undead aboleth in it. Who's also an undead aboleth lich who's also a wizard.
So my tower wasn't. No, wait. No, I own this. And here's why. Tower of the Drowned Dead has an undead aboleth in it.
Oh man!
It has a lich in it, but it's not an undead. I don't believe the aboleth is a lich. I don't think so. Might be. Anyway, and the tower itself is not inverted under the water, but you have to go through the tower in the sort of the opposite direction you might otherwise go through an underwater tower. So the adventure itself is sort of inverted in that regard.
Okay.
So check.
So you already
just
have
for
it.
me.
You don't need another one. So
no, I don't. I don't. No. I don't want that to say I don't need Kate Baker. Kate Baker.
I didn't say.
Please, I need you.
I said you don't need another tower like that. So Catfeld's Bylor asked if only we sent the PFS to Gallows Spire, maybe Last Wall would still be standing.
I guess they did get there quite quickly,
About that, they did send the PFS to Gallows Spire. It was just a little bit after the bad things TM.
Well, there are still plenty of bad things TM that they can prevent in the new interactive special that came out at PaizoCon and is going to be at conventions upcoming, including Gen Con, Siege of Gallows Spire, it's called.
Surprisingly, it goes to Gallows Spire.
Spoilers.
Spoilers.
I gave it all away. I'm sorry.
Well, I think one of the cool things about that is that it takes place right after one of the volumes of Tyrant's Grasp, and so, it doesn't really spoil what you fight there, because the PCs are sort of coming in after it's assumed that the PCs and Pathfinder Society are coming in after it's assumed that Tyrant's Grasp PCs have done what they're going to do, and then they're going into, there's this barrier, this gateway in the Tyrant's Grasp adventure that basically says, and what's beyond this is beyond the scope of the adventure. Which, I love beyond the scope of this adventure, because it's basically a phrase that says, please write more things here. And so that's where we went with that. And we were actually able to reuse a map from that adventure and other places too. So it was nice to tie all that together.
Well, after Pathfinders cleared out the Reaver's Roar thing, they needed the Tyrant's Grasp characters to... Hello, everyone.
Oh, yeah, our computer just crashed. You got it back up again?
I'm going to say we're back to everybody. Look, it's back up. Yes.
Yay.
So anyway, though, what were you guys talking about while I was rebooting it back up with Linda?
We were talking about the Gloomspire series.
Oh man, yeah. The Gloomspire by Tom Phillips. That's a really interesting one too.
I got to develop one of those. Those are awesome.
Oh yeah, you did Frenthar's Throne, right?
Yep. That was before I joined Paizo as a full-time developer. I did some freelance development, and that was one of the scenarios that I did freelance development for.
Yeah,
that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That was the super danger task. I guess we didn't talk about that yet in the interview. That Ron was just a person that when a lot of people got sick and a bunch of stuff happened, and it was like, there's not enough people. Who do we trust who's not here enough to, with literally no on-the-job training, do this work? And the answer was Ron. Ron can do it.
Excellent.
And he did.
And he did. Yeah. And that's why you guys got Hrethnar's Throne instead of I guess the wrong turnover for Professor
Or a delayed scenario, or I don't even know what was at that point.
Instead of what was we were joking earlier today, a scenario called "A Deck of Many Things in Every Room!"
There you go. Or just Ron rewriting the whole thing and it being the multi-dimensional tower of undead wizardry.
A deck of many things in any room. You know, I feel like that would have some stiff competition. Give some stiff competition to Thirsty Shax's House of Pain.
Probably true. Probably
maybe Ron should steal the Spire of Necks from Eric and just have Geb go in there, who's an undead wizard, and then you could have just realize that now it's a tower with an undead wizard. So
that I guess that's true. I mean, Nex has vanished, right? Nobody knows what happened to him. Maybe he's an undead wizard.
Maybe.
Who knows?
It sounds like maybe not, but who knows? All right, so one thing we haven't talked about today at all yet, and we can talk about if the computer doesn't turn off, is the Extinction Curse, which is the AP that was announced at the PaizoCon dinner.
Yes, that is awesome. I'm very excited about that. So the thing about Extinction Curse is what we have, as Mark, as you mentioned earlier in this, a lot of the really fun ideas about what we do come from brainstorming as a group. And very early on in this process, when we knew we were going to be doing this as the second adventure path for the second edition, somebody had mentioned this is, you know, we've had adventures where sort of the circus comes to town and maybe it's creepy, maybe it's evil, maybe it's just sort of the springboard to other adventure. We've never started a whole adventure path where the circus comes to town. To which somebody responded, I don't even remember who it was, might have been Jason Tondro, I'm not sure, responded with, why don't we have the PCs in the circus that comes to town? And at that point, everything just clicked, because we were looking for a reason to explore a lot of the Isle of Kortos. We were looking for something that would tie the, sort of like a home base for the PCs, even though they were traveling. Sometimes that's something like a ship. Sometimes that's something like Baba Yaga's house. But in this case, making it be a traveling circus was absolutely the right answer. It was very exciting for us to do. From there, a lot of the background, the reason that why you're traveling around the Isle of Kortos, other than to try to make money for your circus, is a series of basically a series of locations that Zolgaths, that we used to call troglodytes, are all trying to wreck up for their own reasons. And if they wreck them all up, terrible, terrible things happen. So the player characters soon find themselves in control of the circus. They're sort of the ringmasters. They're running the show, the circus managers, who are taking their show on the road, their people from place to place, then keep making money, while at the same time they're going through all the adventure of trying to figure out what the Zolgaths are up to and then putting a stop to it. It takes them to some very exciting places, from little dinky towns, little tiny, those swamper towns, that in desperate need of entertainment, to Escadar, which is one of the biggest cities on near Absalom. Very pointedly, very intentionally, it doesn't ever get to Absalom. The adventure path is about being part of a traveling circus and being able to get a show in the big city for a long period of time, the way that historically a lot of people did at the World's Fair in Chicago and things like that, where it was months and months long, wasn't in the theme. And so we ended the adventure path sort of with the same sort of travel that it begins as the players are moving around with their circus. That let us play a lot with backgrounds that deal with the circus, mechanics of running a circus. I was giddy to see so many backgrounds that are in the core rulebook already play well with circus, one of which even gives you the circus lore skill. So now we have the player's guide's going to have a lot more backgrounds with many of which provide you circus lore.
Is circus lore going to be overpowered in this adventure path?
No. One of the things that I wanted, that I was pushing for in the rules, is to have, and I don't think this is going to fly, so we'll put this in a what might have been pile, is that circus lore for many times could function instead of performance for stuff you do in a circus. Because if you know a lot about historical circuses, then, this is how the great so-and-so did it, can sometimes cover for not having a lot of personal magnetism or charisma. I don't know if that's going to fly, but circus lore certainly has very many places where it's specifically called out as a useful and relevant lore skill, and that makes a lot of sense in a circus-themed adventure path.
That's good, because I remember when that one with circus lore came in, and somebody, was it Jason or Eric or something, was like, is anyone ever going to use circus lore? And the answer is, well, yes, of course.
We're going, if anybody else, Mark, thinks that they're not going to get a lot of use out of Rules Element X, tell me, we'll just write a whole adventure path around Rules Element X. That'll teach them.
Yeah, there you go. So it looks like at least Catfeld's Byler on the chat thought Eric was joking about the circus AP and is now very intrigued.
Oh no, it is amazingly real.
Yep.
Oh yes. Oh yes. I have done a substantial amount of research, more than I ever thought I would, frankly, for anything, on circuses, sort of old-time circuses generally, traveling shows. I watched the entirety series of Carnival on somebody's suggestion that was awesome. A lot of the old circus art and things like that. One of the ways in which that we've tried to navigate this, and this is something we do a lot with Paizo generally, is we've tried to take those elements of sort of historical lore that are not empowering or are particularly discriminatory or frankly somewhat repulsive, and really downplayed those. The circus that you're in for the Extinction Curse adventure path, for example, doesn't have a freak show. It doesn't have people that are exhibited merely because of their physical oddities. In fact, there's a rival circus. There's an enemy circus that you go up against. They do have a freak show, and so we're able to very specifically say, look, exhibiting people who look differently simply for titillation of audiences is something bad people do.
All right.
Sort of how we're looking to handle slavery in upcoming adventures. Sort of the idea of if you're gonna have a slaver in an adventure, that slaver is going to be the villain of the adventure.
Yeah. So GM Reckless has an idea. Since the PCs are going to be level 20 at the end of Extinction Curse and right around Absalom, maybe there should be a post-game, post-AP plan where they all take the test of the Starstone together, since no one's done it as a circus troupe, as the campaign closeout, to become a new circus pantheon.
That would be awesome.
That would be
have the players become the circus pantheon. I will say, without discussing the sort of things I'm not yet permitted to reveal, the adventure path that's coming after Extinction Curse is something that we're trying to put at least some sort of wink and nod to the Circus of Extinction Curse in. There's sort of a good fit for that, a good place to sort of wink and nod about it. So even though we're not really doing the continuing of the campaign type articles at the end of adventure paths anymore, because you're at level 20, you're done. We talk more about the repercussions of the campaign rather than here's some suggestions about how to get your 17th level characters keep going up to 20th, which is what we used to do. The repercussions are the sort of things where it would be things like, and now maybe you all go take the test of the Starstone, right? So
yeah, and I think it's exciting too, because it's sort of, instead of having that continuing the campaign articles in the back and some of the other things, we actually have the potential to just have the adventure pass be longer and have more content.
Yep.
That's one of the things that I'm excited about people witnessing with the new adventure path design when we roll out Age of Ashes, is the space devoted to the back of the adventure is a little more flexible. It's a little more of an accordion rather than sort of rigid blocks we work around. That allows us to take an extra 2 or 4 pages for the adventure, or take 2 or 4 pages and turn them into another significant NPC we want to develop, or we're still going to have the monsters. We're still going to have a lot of the supplemental type information. If we've got a gazetteer, for example, of an area that's important for the adventure, that'll still be set aside as its own gazetteer. But if an article should be only 4 pages rather than 6, or should be 8 pages rather than 6, and that's all stuff that we can play with.
Yeah, I think we can really make sure it fits the needs of the adventure, and that we're using the space as well as possible, as opposed to trying to fit the components into a specific mold.
And I think that's something that's one of the most understated advantages of Pathfinder 2nd Edition that people don't talk about overall, not just in the APs, which is, for a long time, Paizo did a lot of things in Pathfinder 1st Edition, and when you ask, why are we doing this thing, it's kind of not the best to do this. It's like, well, we've always done this. And Pathfinder 2nd Edition was a good time to look at those things and stop doing all of them unless there was a good reason, except maybe filling lines out to the bottom of the page. That's like one of the only ones that we're kind of mostly still doing that there's not a good reason.
That's true.
And that makes the product like not quite as good as it would be if it wasn't going it to the bottom of the page. But almost all of the other ones, we pretty much tossing them out, doing something different. And just like that part of the AP, that's going to be so much fun to have the back matter that we need, but not the back matter that we're forced to have, and have the adventure that we need, but not the adventure that we have to try to squeeze. So I had another right. question for you, Ron. What is the thing you're most looking forward to in Pathfinder 2nd Edition? And I know you actually, you've seen it, so you're looking forward to when it all is out with all of your knowledge of behind the scenes information.
One of the things that I'm very excited about is the way that we can tell stories in sort of a more flexible way. I think there's something of a problem now where in Pathfinder 1st Edition, the assumption is everything that's going on in the world is going on round by round by round. And if you're going to be taking 1d4 hours to gather information, right? Well, let me track my, 10-minute per level times I'm 9th level, 90-minute buff spells, so on. So, there's a lot of tracking that really gets in the way of telling the story. And the way that 2nd Edition works is to move in a way that I thought was going to be clumsy, but in practice has turned out to be very fluid between here's how we're actually in round by round combat versus here's how we're exploring versus here's how we're in downtime, right? So now, for example, one of the things you want to do if you're going to go run around and tell people in a town that your circus is coming and promote your circus, you don't. That's not 1d6 times 10 minutes to do, right? That's just a thing you do in downtime. It's a thing you spend some downtime doing. All right, reasonable. What else am I going to want to do this downtime? Well, my wizard friend is crafting something, and my fighter who's never happy with any of her life decisions is retraining, and that's so it's one of the things that sort of works naturally that way. I think that's going to be fun to see. I think we can put, as adventure authors, adventure developers, I think we can put some sort of benchmarks in there to say, hey, if somebody is searching with a capital S when they go down this hallway, then they're going to notice da-da-da-da-da-da. To which the GM is like, oh, this is a thing where I'm not having my PCs go square by square, round by round. That's exploration mode. Okay, you're going down this hall. Who's doing what? Oh, I'm looking around. Great, you find this. That's kind of awesome.
I found that exploration mode can be very helpful, although it also is something that can be divisive online, partially because some people undervalue it because they were always doing it kind of that way and are like, well, what's the value of codifying it? But like you, Ron, we have had a player before that we played with in college, and he was like, no, we must parcel it out round by round. I'm convinced that my character would have been able to make it through these 20 rooms in under 5 minutes easily, and I'll show you how I get that way. It's like, well, yeah, but you're a person, you have to stop. And you were talking to us about how you would go to those rooms for over 5 minutes. He's like, no, but look at the rounds and my actions. I could make it into all of these rooms and do a perception check and then go to the other room, and the combat there took 2 rounds, so my 5-minute spell should be up even after the 9th fight. So I'm guessing that you might have encountered that as well based on your description. And certainly exploration mode helps a lot with that, just because it allows players and GMs to take a collaborative approach and say, look, there's time that's passing on, the characters are real people, this is not all done on a battle map, and it's not all done action by action.
Yep. Well, one of the things that it lets people do is so players like to be successful as a general rule, and they don't like
when they are presented with the opportunity to be successful and they see it taken away from them by bad die rolls or something like that.
Like SR43.
Like SR43. Exactly. One of the things that I love about the new edition is that instead of, you're going to walk down the hall. Okay, everybody make me a perception check. What was the highest? 19? Nobody finds anything. You move down the hall, right? That's the point at which everyone around the table is like, the hell, right? I had it. I know that I myself had an opportunity to like win a thing, even if winning the thing is just finding a finding a trap before it goes off, or finding a trap after it's gone off. That they didn't get in the new system though. It's all right if you happen to be detecting magic when you walk past this tree, you'll find a thing, right? You happen to be searching when you're going down this hall. Here's a thing, right? That makes me feel like that makes the players feel like they're in control of the smart things they do and the ways they win, right? Like, oh, phew, good thing I was picking to detect magic because we found this thing. Yay.
That's also
I like that.
Yeah, that's also another advantage of the sort of the fail forward approach that we try to talk about in game mastering, where it's like instead of everyone rolled what's the highest in 19, I guess nothing happens, you keep going. We try to get more of in the adventures and for home GMs to be like, what was the highest? 19? All right, you guys think there might have been something there, so you spend a half an hour looking around and you found it. If they had gotten a 25, maybe they would have just found it right away. But that way, there can be consequences with the 4 degrees of success, with the critical success, the success, and even a failure where the failure, they get the thing that you want them to do, it just has some kind of a cost.
It's at some cost.
Yeah.
It's also fun to put that sort of decision in the PC's hands, letting them control. A sort of tool that I like around the game table is 19, huh? Well, it doesn't succeed, and you do kind of want to get to this evil keep. You get a sense that if you spent some time searching, you might be able to dig something up, but that's going to take you some time. Mm-hmm. And then that PCs are like, well, do we want to take that time? Do we want to keep going? Then it's a decision, right? Then you get a table argument.
They have a choice. They get picked. Do they want to fail or do they want to succeed at a cost?
But I mean, speaking of Ron's tips for GMing and other things like that, Ron has a place where he writes all about various GMing tips and strategies.
That's right. I think it referenced something that I wrote in back matter of one of Ron's adventures on there at some point.
Absolutely correct. Yes. I am a big fan of getting out all I know about adventure design. I don't think that there's anything sort of ivory tower about it. I think it's a sort of thing that a lot of people enjoy, a lot of people can do, but I think a lot of people kind of flounder because they're like, well, I don't know what to do about X. I don't know what good tendency is for Y. So what I've done is I've started to put together on my blog at Run Amok Games. Run Amok Games is my third-party imprint, and the runamokgames.com/blog has what is now months and months and months of once, twice, sometimes 3 times a week GM writer tips, RPG writer tips. The RPG writer tips are all sorts of things. I'm getting growled at. Anyway, the RPG writer tips has a lot to do with people who are writing adventures for all sorts of systems and all sorts of things. Thank you. Hey, I see the link.
I have made the link appear. How did that happen?
But I go into some things that are either very big picture, like, how do you actually work on constructing a narrative? How do you actually go through the process of writing something for publication if you're a hired freelancer? To some things that are very minor, like here's how you draw an angled hallway on a map that isn't dumb. So there's an awful lot of different stuff there. I recommend everybody check it out. Anybody who wants to reach out to me, I cross-post it on Facebook and my Twitter. Let me know what you'd like to see. I'm happy to do more. Things that people specifically say, I don't know how to do X. Kate Baker actually was the one that said, hey, what's a good way to think about ending a campaign you're running? If people are going to be moving away, you've got an end date, what do you do about that? And that advice was initially just go read Mark Cypher's article that he wrote at the end of Tyrant's Grasp. But since that adventure isn't out yet, let me embellish with a lot of other things. That's the thing you mentioned there is specifically how to bring a campaign to a dramatic and successful conclusion.
All right, awesome. And speaking of bringing things to a dramatic and successful conclusion, We've kept you for the hour that you promised. So does anyone on chat have any last questions for Ron? If you do, then queue him up. And while you are, I think it's time to say goodbye to YouTube. So, bye everybody at YouTube.
Thanks so much.
See you next week. All right, now we're back.